I used to believe trust was the most unshakable foundation a marriage could have. Not passion, not wealth, not even love. Trust. And for 18 years, Lisa and I lived as if nothing could touch ours. Picture it, a suburban street lined with maples, the kind that blaze red and gold every autumn. A white two-story house with a swing set in the backyard, children's chalk drawings fading on the driveway. Inside that house was my world, 3 kids who believed the floor was lava, the smell of Lisa's lasagna drifting from the kitchen, laughter echoing down the hallway. If someone had told me then that my marriage was already a house of cards, I would have laughed. Because Lisa wasn't just my wife, she was my anchor, my teammate, the one who reminded me to slow down when life felt like a sprint. She had a way of walking into a room that softened its edges. Dark hair pulled into a careless bun, tired but sparkling eyes, that half-smile that told me she'd thought of a joke before anyone else. I'd come home from work, loosen my tie at the door, and she'd greet me with a kiss and a teasing remark about whose turn it was to handle bedtime chaos. The twins would squeal in their high chairs, our oldest would run up clutching a Lego masterpiece. Those were the moments I lived for, and I told myself we were untouchable. But peace doesn't shatter with a bang. It cracks, quiet and insidious, in ways you can't see until the fracture has spread too far to mend. The first crack appeared one late evening. The house was still humming with the remnants of family noise, the dishwasher rattling, the faint sound of the twins breathing over the baby monitor. I was on the couch, legs stretched, half watching a rerun on TV. Lisa was beside me scrolling on her phone, her lips pressed together in a way I'd seen only when she was making a decision she didn't want me to challenge. Her phone chimed. She read a message, exhaled sharply, then set it on the coffee table with a deliberateness that made me straighten. "What's up?" I asked. She didn't look at me. Instead, she smoothed her hair back, eyes fixed on the darkened TV screen. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but there was a kind of finality in it, like she'd already rehearsed the lines. "Grant, there's something I've decided to do." My chest tightened. The phrasing was wrong. Decided. Not thinking about. Not want to talk through. Just decided. "What is it?" I asked, muting the television. Lisa turned toward me, and I caught a glint of determination in her eyes that I hadn't seen since she fought for a promotion at work years ago. But this time, the fire in her gaze wasn't about her career or our family. It was about something else entirely. "I'm going to help Sarah," she said. "She can't have a baby. The treatments aren't working. So I'm going to carry one for her." The words landed like shards of glass in my chest. For a moment I thought I'd misheard her. "You're what?" Her jaw set. "A surrogate. For Sarah and Kevin. The embryo is theirs. It'll just be me carrying it." I stared at her, every nerve in my body sparking. I wanted to believe this was some elaborate, tasteless joke. But there was no laughter hiding at the corners of her mouth. She meant it. "You've already..." My voice cracked. "Lisa, tell me you haven't already started this." Her silence answered before she did. She reached for her phone again, scrolling quickly, avoiding my eyes. "I've been talking to the clinic. And with Kevin." That last name was a knife. "With Kevin," I repeated slowly, the words tasting like acid. "Not with me. Not with your husband. But Kevin knows." Lisa finally looked at me then, her face unflinching. "Because he's the father. He had to be involved." I felt heat rush into my skull, my hands balling into fists on my knees. My wife, my partner of nearly 2 decades, had planned to carry another man's child under our roof. And she hadn't thought to even ask me. There are betrayals you can recover from. A forgotten birthday. A white lie about money. But this was something else. A violation not just of vows, but of the very partnership I'd built my life on. That night, as Lisa sat there with her chin lifted like a soldier bracing for battle, I realized the house we'd built together wasn't as solid as I thought. The foundation was already crumbling, and I was about to watch it collapse. I didn't sleep that night. While Lisa lay in the guest room, she said she needed space to think. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the pattern of the wood grain like it held an answer. Every sound in the house was amplified: the hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of the floorboards upstairs, the distant sigh of the twins turning in their sleep. Normally those sounds comforted me. That night they felt like accusations, whispers reminding me that everything I thought I knew about my wife had shifted in an instant. I replayed her words over and over. I'm going to carry one for her. Not we decided. Not what do you think? Just a pronouncement, as if my presence in the marriage were optional. By morning I was exhausted, but fury kept me sharp. At breakfast, Lisa moved around the kitchen as though nothing had changed. She cracked eggs, buttered toast, smiled at the kids when they asked for more juice. Only when she looked at me did her smile falter, as if she knew the fragile illusion of normalcy couldn't stretch far enough to cover us. Can we talk after the kids go to school? She asked softly. Her tone was conciliatory, but I caught the steel beneath it. This wasn't a negotiation. It was damage control. I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. When the last backpack zipped and the school bus groaned away, silence fell over the kitchen. Lisa leaned against the counter, arms folded. She was wearing that look she used when she believed she was right, and nothing I said could move her. Grant, she began, I need you to understand. Sarah is my sister. My twin. We share everything, our childhood, our DNA, our secrets. Watching her struggle these past years has been unbearable. I have to do this for her. Her voice cracked just enough to sound human, but it didn't move me. And I'm just supposed to watch you bring another man's child into our home? Pretend I'm okay with you risking your health, our marriage, our family, for a decision you made with Kevin before you even thought to mention it to me? She flinched at his name, but she didn't back down. You're twisting this. It's Sarah's baby. Kevin is just part of the equation. My laugh was bitter. Equation. That's what our marriage is now. A math problem where I'm the variable you forgot to carry? Her eyes hardened. Don't make this about pride. Pride? I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the kids wouldn't hear if they came back inside. This is about loyalty. About partnership. About the fact that you treated your husband like an afterthought. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. But she buried it quickly, smoothing it over with stubborn resolve. If you loved me, you'd support me, she whispered. That sentence was gasoline on the fire. Because love, in my mind, had always been about us. About mutual sacrifice, mutual respect. And here she was, redefining it as unconditional obedience. The conversation ended not with a resolution, but with silence sharp enough to cut. She went upstairs, and I stood in the kitchen gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles ached. The days that followed were like walking through glass. Lisa moved forward with her plans as if my objections were background noise. Packages arrived from the fertility clinic, vials, syringes, packets of instructions, stacked neatly on the kitchen table beside the salt and pepper shakers. The normal trappings of family life collided with the sterile intrusions of a secret project I wanted no part of. One evening, I found her in the bathroom mirror, injecting herself with hormones. She didn't look up when I walked in, just pressed the needle to her skin with steady precision. Unbelievable, I muttered. It's just medicine, she said. No, I shot back. It's just betrayal dressed up in syringes. For a second, her hand trembled. But then she finished the injection and set the needle carefully into its case. When she finally met my eyes in the mirror, there was no remorse, only exhaustion. You'll never understand, she said. And maybe she was right. The tension bled into everything. At dinner, our oldest asked, "Why don't you and Mom sit together anymore?" I fumbled through an answer about grown-ups having disagreements, while Lisa sat silent, eyes shining but unreadable. Even the house seemed to sense the fracture. Rooms felt colder, walls thinner, the laughter of our children more fragile. Everywhere I looked, I saw the cracks spreading, subtle but unstoppable. And though I still clung to the idea of salvaging something, deep down I knew this wasn't just a fight. It was the beginning of a collapse. It happened on a Saturday morning, the kind of morning that should have been filled with cartoons and pancakes. Instead, I walked downstairs to find my living room occupied, claimed, by people who no longer felt like family. Sarah sat on the couch, glossy stroller catalog spread across her lap, pointing out features to Kevin. He lounged in my recliner, my chair, flipping through pages like he belonged there. Lisa hovered nearby, hand absently resting on the small swell of her belly. The sight froze me mid-step. For a second, I wondered if I'd wandered into someone else's home. "What is this?" My voice cut through the room. All three heads turned. Kevin stood up quickly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey, Grant. We were just helping Lisa look at some things. You know, baby prep. Baby prep. In my house." As if the words weren't corrosive enough, Lisa's expression tightened. "Don't start," she warned softly. "I asked them to come?" My hands curled into fists. "You asked them to turn my home into a nursery showroom? For a baby that isn't even ours?" Kevin shifted uncomfortably, but Sarah didn't flinch. She met my glare with one of her own, her jaw set like stone. "We're family," she said evenly. "This is about making sure Lisa is comfortable. You don't have to like it, but you should at least respect it." Respect. That word again. It ricocheted in my skull like a bullet. I took a step closer, my voice low and sharp. Respect vanished the second you and Kevin decided to plot this with my wife behind my back. Kevin raised his hands defensively. "Look, man, I get this is hard. My laugh was jagged. "Watching my wife carry your child under my roof, using our money, without my consent? You think this is just hard?" The room vibrated with the silence that followed. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock, loud enough to feel like it was counting down to something inevitable. Finally, Lisa snapped. "Stop it, Grant! Stop acting like a victim. This is bigger than you. This is about helping Sarah." Her voice trembled, but her eyes blazed with conviction. And in that moment I realized something: she wasn't going to stop. Not because of me. Not because of us. The marriage we'd built together wasn't her priority anymore. I turned to Sarah and Kevin, forcing calm into my tone. "Pack up the catalogs. Get out of my house. From now on, this isn't your meeting place. If you want to play house with Lisa, do it in your own living room." Kevin's mouth opened, but Sarah's hand shot out to his arm. She stared at me for a long moment, anger, pity, maybe even triumph flickering in her eyes, then snapped the stroller booklet shut. "Fine. We'll go." They gathered their things in stiff silence, Lisa glaring at me the whole time. As the door closed behind them, she rounded on me, voice shaking with fury. "You're a child," she spat. "You're alienating the only people who understand what I'm doing." I stared at her, my anger hollowing into something colder. "No. I'm drawing the line. And if you can't see the difference, then maybe you don't understand what marriage means at all." Her lips parted, but no words came. She spun on her heel, storming upstairs, leaving me alone in the wreckage of what used to be a home. That night, the house felt different. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier. Even the children's laughter upstairs couldn't lift the weight pressing down on me. I sat in the dark living room, staring at the empty recliner Kevin had occupied. My recliner. The symbol was too sharp to ignore. My place had been usurped. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I realized this wasn't about arguments or silent treatments anymore. It wasn't about waiting for Lisa to come to her senses. It was war. And wars aren't won by waiting. So I made my decision. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The words I spoke felt foreign, like I was narrating someone else's life. "I need to file for divorce," I said. As I hung up the phone, a strange calm settled over me. Not relief, not yet. But clarity. The kind that comes when you stop clinging to a crumbling structure and decide to walk away before it collapses on top of you. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was done pretending we still stood on the same side. Filing for divorce should have been a clean break, at least on paper. But life isn't paper. It's flesh, bone, and memory, and every day under the same roof with Lisa was a reminder of how impossible this situation had become. The lawyer had explained the process. In our state, a mandatory separation period meant Lisa and I would remain legally bound for a year before the court finalized anything. Which meant we were trapped together, two strangers inhabiting the same home, pretending for the kids' sake that we hadn't already burned the bridge between us. The house felt like a battlefield. She moved into the guest room, shutting the door at night as if locking me out of more than just a bedroom. I took the master. We navigated hallways like soldiers avoiding crossfire. The kids noticed, of course. Children always notice. Our oldest stopped asking why we no longer ate at the same table, but the silence in their eyes was worse than the questions. One evening, Lisa waddled into the kitchen, belly already beginning to show, and asked me to grab her a glass of water. The request was so ordinary, so mundane, that for a second I almost did. But then I remembered the needle in her hand, the catalogs in my chair, Kevin's name whispered in conversations I was excluded from. "Ask Kevin," I said flatly, turning back to the sink. Her eyes went wide. "Grant, please. It's just water. And it's just betrayal," I answered, my voice low but steady. She sucked in a breath, as if I'd struck her. Then she muttered something under her breath, heartless, and shuffled away. The truth was, I wasn't heartless. My chest still ached every night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the memory of when we were happy. But I had to bury that ache beneath something harder. If I gave her even one gesture of compassion, I feared it would reopen the wound I was barely holding closed. The tension spread beyond us. Lisa's parents called often, their voices dripping with condemnation. "Selfish," her mother accused. "Your wife is doing something beautiful, and you treat her like garbage." "Ungrateful boy," her father growled. "If you don't stand by Lisa, you'll regret it." I let their words wash over me like cold rain. I'd already decided. I wouldn't play the villain in their story just to soothe their conscience. But every call, every insult, tightened the noose of pressure around me. The breaking point came in the 7th month. Lisa returned home from a hospital appointment carrying grocery bags. She struggled with the weight, nearly dropping one on the porch. "Grant!" she called, her voice strained. "Can you please help me? My back." I stood in the doorway, arms folded. The memory of her smile from years ago flickered in my mind. How she used to greet me with a hug when I came home from work, how the kids' laughter wrapped around us like music. And then, just as quickly, the memory dissolved into the image of her injecting hormones in the bathroom without a word to me. "Ask Sarah?" I said. Her face crumpled. For the first time, she didn't respond with anger. Instead, tears welled up, spilling down her cheeks as she set the bags down roughly and dragged them inside alone. A can rolled across the tile, clattering, and she bent to pick it up with a grunt of pain. I watched. I did nothing. When she finally looked up, her eyes weren't blazing with fury anymore. They were hollow, wounded. "You can't keep punishing me like this," she whispered. I shook my head slowly. "I'm not punishing you. I'm refusing to save you from a decision you made without me." Her lip trembled. For a heartbeat, I almost reached for her, almost. But then she turned away, disappearing into the guest room. The silence that followed was suffocating. That night, the kids asked if they could sleep in my room because Mom seemed sad. I took them in, forcing a smile, hiding the fracture spreading wider in my chest. After they fell asleep, I sat in the dark and admitted what I'd been denying. I still loved her. Or maybe I loved the memory of her, the woman who used to make me laugh over burnt pancakes, who used to look at me like I was the only man in the room. But that woman was gone. In her place stood someone I no longer recognized. And as the walls of our house grew colder, I realized the climax was coming, the moment when words, silence, and simmering resentment would no longer be enough. The collapse was inevitable. The only question was who would survive it standing. It was just past midnight when the pounding started. At first, I thought it was thunder, distant and rolling across the roof. But then I heard her voice, sharp, panicked, breaking in the hallway. "Grant! Please! My water! Oh God, it's happening!" The words cut through me like a blade. I bolted upright in bed. For a brief, disorienting moment, the past replayed in my head, the first time she went into labor with our twins, her hand crushing mine, her eyes wide with pain and trust. I had whispered, "I'm here. I've got you." And I had meant it with every fiber of my being. But that night was different. I opened the door. Lisa stood there, doubled over, clutching her stomach, sweat plastering her hair to her face. The hallway light glistened on her tears. She looked smaller somehow, despite the swell of her belly, like a child begging not to be left behind. "Please, Grant," she gasped. "Kevin's not answering. Sarah's phone, voicemail. I can't do this alone." For a heartbeat, my instincts screamed at me to catch her, to help her to the car, to drive through red lights just to get her safe. But another voice spoke louder, the one that had grown in me these past months, forged from betrayal and silence. "You already chose to do this alone," I said. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't mean that. Grant, I'm—" A contraction ripped through her words. She gripped the wall, knuckles white, a cry tearing from her throat. I swallowed hard, forcing my hands to stay at my sides. My chest burned, my throat tight with the weight of every memory we'd shared, 18 years of love, of family, of trust, and how it all ended in secrecy and signatures forged in my name. "You decided my part wasn't needed," I whispered. "So don't look for me now." She sobbed, half plea, half scream. "I can't, please, just help me to the car." I stepped back, the doorframe cold against my spine. "Call an ambulance. Call your family. Call Kevin. Call anyone but me." The betrayal in her eyes was almost worse than the pain twisting her body. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as a husband, not even as an enemy, but as a stranger who no longer belonged in her story. When the next contraction hit, she fumbled for her phone, hands shaking so violently she nearly dropped it. I watched, frozen, as she dialed 3 digits with a choked breath. The paramedics arrived minutes later, red and blue lights flickering against the walls of our home like fireworks at a funeral. I stayed in the bedroom doorway silent, while they strapped her onto a stretcher and carried her out, the sirens screaming into the night. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt both hollow and certain. The following days blurred into whispers and accusations. Her family called me heartless, a monster, a man who abandoned his wife in her darkest hour. Maybe they were right. But I reminded myself, she had abandoned me first. At the hospital, she gave birth to a premature baby girl. Sarah was still recovering from her own complications, so Lisa kept the infant with her, cradling a child she'd promised away. I didn't visit. I couldn't. When she came home days later carrying the car seat through our front door, the sight of that baby nearly undid me. Not because I felt tenderness, but because the tiny pink bundle was a living emblem of everything we'd lost. I asked only one question. "Why is she here?" Lisa's eyes were dull, her voice hollow. "Sarah's too weak. Kevin can't handle it alone. Just for a little while." I shook my head. "That's not our child. That's not my problem. Don't ask me to touch her, don't ask me to feed her. That's yours to carry, like every other decision you made without me." Lisa's lip trembled, but she didn't argue. She only turned away, rocking the infant slowly, tears dripping onto its blanket. 2 weeks later, we stood in court. The judge's gaze was cold, her words cutting through the air like a verdict carved in stone. She laid out the facts, Lisa's unilateral decision, her misuse of marital funds, the forgery of my signature. She reminded the room that the baby wasn't mine, and would never be my responsibility. "Primary custody of the 3 children goes to the petitioner," the judge ruled. "Spousal support denied. Repayment of misused funds ordered." Lisa crumpled in her seat, shoulders shaking as silent tears streamed down her face. Sarah sat behind her, pale and weak, Kevin's hand gripping hers tightly. I felt no triumph, only something colder. Vindication, maybe? When Lisa looked at me afterward, her voice cracked, barely audible. I never thought you'd leave me like this. I met her eyes, steady and unflinching. And I never thought you'd choose them over us. Her breath hitched, as if those words broke her more than the ruling ever could. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt lighter. Not happy. Not healed. But free. The war was over. And I was still standing. The weeks after the court ruling felt eerily quiet, as though the world itself had exhaled after holding its breath too long. The house, my house now, finally belonged to silence again. No more whispered phone calls in hallways. No more boxes of syringes on the kitchen counter. No more crying infant whose face reminded me of betrayal. Just me and the kids, filling the rooms with a gentler kind of noise, Lego towers clattering to the floor, the splash of bathwater, the soft rhythm of bedtime stories. For the first time in months, I could breathe. But relief doesn't erase scars. It just allows you to trace them without bleeding. Every morning, when I packed the twins' lunches or tied shoelaces before school, I caught echoes of Lisa, the way she used to hum while buttering toast, the way she tucked a note into our oldest's backpack with doodled hearts. Memory is cruel like that. It resurrects the parts of someone you lost, not the parts you fought. She wasn't gone entirely, of course. Divorce is never disappearance. She saw the kids during scheduled visits, picking them up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sometimes, when she returned them, I caught a glimpse of that old warmth in her face, as though she wanted to ask me how I'd been, as though she wanted to bridge the chasm she'd carved. But the words always stayed trapped behind her lips, and I never reached for them. Because what was left to say? One evening, months after the dust had settled, I found myself alone on the back porch while the kids slept. The night was heavy with summer heat, crickets chirping in the grass, the faint scent of cut lawn still hanging in the air. I held a glass of water in my hand, staring at the reflections rippling across its surface. I thought about Lisa. About the woman I had once believed was stitched to my soul. About the choices she made, and the man those choices forced me to become. Was I merciless? Maybe. Cold? Without question. But as I sat there under the canopy of stars, I realized my revenge had never been about cruelty. It had been about survival. If I had caved, if I had carried her through the pregnancy of another man's child, I would have lost myself. And if a man loses himself, what is left for his children to look up to? Still, survival has its own price. My children had lost the family they once knew. Lisa had lost the life we'd built together. And I had lost the woman I loved, not to death, but to a decision she could never take back. Months turned into a year. The rhythm of life steadied. The kids grew taller, their questions sharper but less frequent. They seemed lighter, freer without the shadow of constant fighting. One night, while tucking in my oldest, he looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. "Dad, do you still love Mom?" The question lodged in my throat. I sat on the edge of his bed, searching his innocent face for the right answer. "I care about her," I said finally. "Because she's your mother. And I always will. But love is built on trust. And sometimes, when trust breaks, love doesn't survive." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than a child should, then rolled over to sleep. I sat there a long time, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, my heart aching with both pride and loss. I never remarried. Not yet, anyway. Some wounds take longer than others to close. Lisa moved in with her parents for a while, then into a small apartment near Sarah and Kevin, who were still struggling under the weight of hospital bills and sleepless nights. Rumor had it Lisa regretted everything, that she admitted it hadn't saved her sister, only destroyed her marriage. She sent me an email once. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. "I never imagined I'd lose you. I thought love would survive anything. I see now I was wrong. I'm sorry." I read it twice. Then I closed the laptop without replying. Because forgiveness is not a gift owed. It's a bridge, and some bridges, once burned, are better left in ashes. As I sit here now, years later, the house is quiet again. My children's laughter drifts from the backyard where they chase each other through the dusk. The sky burns with the last light of day, a reminder that endings can be beautiful, even when they arrive in flames. I used to think the cruelest thing Lisa ever did was betray me. But I see now, the cruelest thing I ever did was let her face the full weight of her choice alone. And yet, that was the only way to reclaim myself. Trust was broken. Love was buried. But dignity survived. And sometimes, dignity is the only thing worth saving.